Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to update you with some housekeeping points in here before that we get started in a few minutes. Everyone is going to be in listen-only mode. You do have a chat window in there that you can post your question at any time. We're going to address it at the end of this webinar. And there's also a QR code that is going to be shared with you at the end of the webinar where we're going to ask for your feedback. We always love to hear from you in any way that if the topics that we are doing is what you're looking for, if there's any other topics that you look for in the future. Okay, we will be starting in a few minutes. Thank you. Hello, and welcome to another session of Team Canada Tech Thursdays. My name is Wael Anwaisri. I am a sales engineer with WatchGuard Canada, and today we have a very good topic that a lot of people are asking about, which is how to secure your remote user VPN with MFA, and specifically our version of MFA, which is AuthPoint product. In today's agenda, we're going to talk first about the pros and cons of the different protocol when it comes to VPN and remote users. And then we're going to talk about the components, how to configure, and some tips related to SSL multi-user VPN integration with AuthPoint. And then we're going to continue with the IKE version 2 integration with AuthPoint MFA. And these are the two most popular options that's being used by clients and partners. So it was important before diving into the integration with MFA is to take another look at the pros and cons about the different protocol of VPN. So the most popular one, and we see a lot of clients and partners using, is the SSL VPN, which is the most kind of administrator user-friendly, as we can say. Some of the pros of SSL VPN that it works on any operating system, including legacy ones and Linux. It allows for interface bridging to support legacy application that cannot route. It's very easy to do split tunneling through the configuration. It works with all authentication servers and it can support multiple authentication server simultaneously. And also we know that when it comes to the SSL VPN, it doesn't require a specific configuration of the firewall. So if the remote user is behind another firewall that doesn't belong to us, it's not something that it's being blocked. Some of the cons related to SSL VPN that it requires client software to be installed on all platforms. This is something that's available from WatchGuard, but something also to keep an eye on when it comes to the different updates and if it's need to be updated or not when you're updating your operating system on the firewall. It has the lowest throughput compared to IPsec and IKE version 2. There is no ability to restrict which clients are connecting. It cannot be mass deployed easily and requires manual distribution of the client configuration when you're going to be using OpenVPN or non-Mac Windows platform. And just to add in here that even the one that we are using, it is a version of OpenVPN that you can download from WatchGuard site. Moving on to the IPsec, when it comes to the pros, it has a higher throughput than the SSL VPN. It allows independent virtual pool subnet for different users as or groups. This is one of the requirements some of the distributed enterprises are looking for. It works on most operating systems. It might be limited on the Android. It allows pre-login VPN connection. This is another thing that some of the enterprises are looking for, that they want the pre-login with a Windows machine, so that whenever that they log in using your username and password for Active Directory, that also is going to start the connection through the VPN, but that's available through the Shoe Pro 2.2 or higher, or most of the time that is through the NCP, which is mainly a client that you have to pay for when it comes to the licensing. It's easy to do split tunneling. Sometimes that it could, be affected if you have internal branch office VPN networking that's going to be changing all the time. Some of the cons that's related to the IPsec that's most difficult to configure. It requires manual distribution of the client files. It cannot be mass deployed easily. And it is the weakest security because it uses IKE version 2 aggressive mode. Um, and this is why some people, when they want to go with IPsec, they prefer going to IKE version 2. It doesn't allow local traffic to be initiated to the remote clients, and it doesn't allow third-party certificates. Some other cons that relate to the IPsec, that it's the only supported Windows software today. It's something that you have to pay for, so it's a little bit more expensive. You have to go through NCP client that you can buy through WatchGuard, but it is a bit costly. Pre-login feature cannot be used with AuthPoint login app. So that's one of the conflicts, since we're going to be talking about AuthPoint. So if you're going to be using IPsec, right, pre-login feature cannot be done if you're going to be using the MFA in there. The NCP filter driver can conflict with other VPN clients on the computer, including our own SSL client if you're going to be installing both at the same time. NCP do not work with Diffie-Hellman 19 and 20. Right, so there's a lot of cons when it comes to the IPsec, but sometimes it is useful in case that you want to have multiple pools and you want to use pre-login with Windows and you're not going to use MFA. When it comes to the IKE version 2, which is growing in popularity nowadays, some of the pros that it's related to it is that the best throughput and security. It's easy to deploy on all platforms, allows pre-login for VPN connection. So again, this is one of the features that some enterprises are looking for, can be mass deployed. One of the things that applies to all these 3 points above, that definitely it's going to make your life easier if you know scripting. And you have an Active Directory and you can actually run the script, test it, and after that you mass deploy it using GPOs. Static IPs can be used for specific users in Active Directory. Some of the cons, that it requires a client on Android that it's going to prevent the AuthPoint. Difficult to do split tunneling. It is doable, but you have to do the configuration and it's done on the client side. AD authentication only works with the MPS role installed. So that's another extra component has to be done, and we're going to be talking more in details about it today when it comes to the integration with AuthPoint. It doesn't work on legacy operating system. There's no Linux configuration files, and it shares the license limit with IPsec. That means if you take a look at the data sheet for your firewall, you'll see that you have the IPsec tunnels and this IKE version 2 also, that it's gonna be sharing the same number depending on what's the limit on that firewall. Okay, so since we took a look at the different type of VPN protocols, depending on your situation, you can choose which one to go with. Let's start here talking about the SSL integration with our AuthPoint MFA. This slide, it's one of the slides that I shared before in one of my webinars, and it is very important so that you will understand the components and how the process is going to be done. So in general, what we're talking about when it comes to the component, there is some configuration that's going to be done on your side of the network, and there's some configuration that's going to be done on the cloud or the dashboard for the AuthPoint. So when it comes to the component here, definitely we need the firewall, and we need to install something called the AuthPoint Gateway Agent internally. That AuthPoint Gateway Agent, it's going to actually act as the Radius server, and the Firebox is going to be the Radius client. And also on the Gateway Agent, it's going to act as an LDAP agent, so that it's going to communicate with the LDAP database. The whole scenario that we're going to be talking about when it comes to the overview of the steps that I'm going to show you in a moment, that it is we have users that's part of the Active Directory, and they want to do an SSL VPN. Right, so they're going to be using username and password that is stored in Active Directory, and then the secondary factor is going to be pushed to their phone. Okay. When it comes to the AuthPoint Gateway Agent, definitely it can be installed on the Active Directory or any device, Windows device that it has access to the rest of the network in there, right? Now let's go through the steps so that you'll understand also from the point of view of all these components and how they're going to communicate together. So let's say that now we have a user that already have SSL VPN client that's been installed on his machine. He gonna request the access through the SSL VPN. He put the username and password that is part of Active Directory. That request is going to go to the firewall. The firewall here is the Radius client. They're going to communicate with the Radius server that is being installed as part of the gateway agent. And then you will notice that the gateway agent, it will send the request to AuthPoint in the cloud. Now, AuthPoint, because we want to tell that the AuthPoint in the cloud that this username and password is actually part of an Active Directory group. The request of the LDAP authorization for the user password is sent back to the AuthPoint gateway agent that is installed on the internal network. That gateway agent is going to be communicating here, sending the request to the LDAP database or the Active Directory, and then we will have the response, that the authorization for that specific user. This information is going to be sent back here and say, okay, the user password is being validated. Please send the response to AuthPoint. So as you can see, the gateway agent is the one that doing all the facilitate the communication and communicate, kind of speaking two different languages. The LDAP and the Radius. This information is going to be sent here to AuthPoint, in the cloud, and saying the user password is being validated. That's the time the push notification is going to be sent to the user on their mobile phone, and then the user is going to approve the push notification. And then we have the authentication approval sent to the gateway, and then he will have the SSL VPN is going to be established. Some of the things here that just to keep in mind, always that the gateway agent is the Radius server, and the Firebox or the firewall is going to be your Radius client. If you're going to install this gateway agent on a server that already have MPS on it, so you have to change the port from 1812 to something else. And also when it comes to some of the troubleshooting that is related to gateway agent, actually it is under a hidden folder, program data, WatchGuard, AuthPoint logs, so that you can see whenever that you do the installation of the gateway, the communication is okay or not, that there is no other, maybe you have two-layer firewall that is blocking the communication between these two components. Okay, so now let's jump into the environment and let's go over the steps in WatchGuard Cloud and also the other components that we talked about. Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out before that we continue into the WatchGuard Cloud dashboard and show you the steps, that this is just kind of an overview so that you will understand the overview of the process. This is not a replacement for the AuthPoint integration guides. So you have a detailed integration guides, including for the one for the SSL VPN in there that I highly recommend that you take a look at it, while that you are doing the configuration in your environment. Another thing that I wanted to point out that there's a version 12.7 that is being um, released already, that it's actually have components that's related to the AuthPoint gateway that it is already embedded into the firewall, and it is useful in specific scenarios whenever that you have an environment that you require SSL VPN and IKE version 2, but you don't need to synchronize with an Active Directory. So they're going to be created in the cloud, or that they're going to be also part of the firewall database itself, right? But in today's demo that I'm going to show you, we are actually going to be installing the AuthPoint gateway in the environment because we're going to be synchronizing with Active Directory. So let's jump into the dashboard. Um, Once that I go to WatchGuard Cloud, definitely you have to have the licenses for these users, or if you're just starting, you can do the trial. And once that you click on configure, we're going to go to AuthPoint in there. Um, I'm not going to follow everything as the integration guide, but in a kind of a logical way, that the gateway is one of the most important components in here, that I have to add a gateway. You just going to give it a name. And when it comes to the rest of the configuration, we're going to come back to it later. Uh, Once that you add the gateway in here, you're going to go also under downloads, and you're gonna download the gateway installer, and you will notice here uh, the version of the gateway installer, the date that is being released, the system requirement. So it can be installed in Windows Server 2019, 16, or 2012 R2. And also it's going to require Java, but also you can download Amazon Corretto version 11. That's the one that it's a recommended version. So once that you download the installer, you're going to be installing that on your Windows Server or the Active Directory within your environment. There will be some kind of registration key that is going to be used whenever that you are installing the gateway installer in there. Once that it's been installed, when you come here to the gateway, you will see that it is being connected. If there is any other issues, that's going to be gray or orange. That means maybe there's no communication. Then you have to go into the logs that on the gateway agent itself, that where it's been installed, and find out why it is not communicating out. You also have the option when it comes to the gateway agent to be installed on a secondary, a server as a backup, right? Now, once this step has been done, then we're going to go here into resources. One of the things that you can create when it comes to the resources, as you can see, the examples like Identity Provider Portal, the Login app, the Firebox, the Radius client, and so on. So one of the things that we want to add here is the Radius client, and we're going to add resource. We're going to give it a name. We're going to put here the IP address. I already created one for you here. I called it, for me as SSL VPN Radius client, so that's going to be easier for me to understand what stand for. Um, the IP address that in here, it has to be the IP address of the internal IP address of the firewall on the trust interface. Then you can have the value sent for the radius. When it comes to attribute 11, you have two options, either that you can do the user's AuthPoint group, which is something that can be created on AuthPoint, or you can do the user Active Directory group in this scenario, since we are going to be syncing with Active Directory. And also we have the shared secret, right? So you're going to type in the shared secret and you have to document it so that later on we're going to use it on the configuration on the firewall, right? Once this is saved, now we have the resource. We can go back to the gateway in here, okay? And we can add that resource under the radius, right? Well, I called it SSL VPN, so it will be on the drop-down menu in here, and it's going to be using the port 1820. So we are telling the gateway agent, which is going to be the radius server, where to go when it comes to, or what are the client that's going to communicate with it internally, which is going to be the firewall in this scenario. All right. So once that we have now this resource and we updated the gateway with this information, we can start creating or communicating with the external identities. So if I go here to the external identities, you have the option to add an LDAP or Azure AD. Today, we're going to be talking about the normal Active Directory that you have on premise. And it is actually very standard when it comes to the configuration that you're going to give it a name, the LDAP search base. It has to be in this format. So the DC, right? It's going to be the domain. And after that, is it .net, .com, and so on. You're going to put the system account user. So here it can be administrator, or you can put anyone that have privilege to actually search the global catalog and sync with the Active Directory. Right. So after we put the system account username and we're going to have the password, we have the synchronization is going to happen every 1 hour by default. You can reduce it if you want, if there's a lot of changes that's happening with your Active Directory, or you can put as 24 hours if there's almost no change that's happening in your Active Directory. Then we're going to put the domain information. The rest of the attributes in here that is already filled, that you don't need to do anything about it. But one of the information that you need to put here is the server address, which is your Active Directory server address. And the port, which is by default is 389. You also have the option to add a redundant address if you wanted to. Once that you save the external identity, which is your Active Directory, one of the things that you can do in here is to check connection. Check connection is just going to check if actually it is reachable or not, right? If you have any issues in here, again, you're going to go back to your Active Directory where you install the gateway agent and find out what's the issue. Most of the time, the issue is in here that it's related, maybe the password is not correct for the your administrator, or maybe the search base it's not correct, or maybe the user that you added he doesn't have any privileges to search or synchronize with the Active Directory, right? Now, one of the things that it's important is to create a group. So under a group, we can create a group here to kind of organize what we're going to do with the AuthPoint. So usually that we will have users that part of the group, and then we're going to apply resources to them. And here I created a group that's called Sales Engineer. As you can see, there's nothing much that I can do it here other than give it a name and a description. But the reason that I created it so that once that I go back to external identity, I can sync, the whole Active Directory or a specific group to this group that I created on AuthPoint Dashboard. You also have the option whenever that you are actually synchronizing with your Active Directory to create the group here automatically with the same name that you have in Active Directory. So you have both options, but for me, I prefer usually to have to create the group here, and after that, I can come to the external identities, and I have the option here to do group sync. So when I come to the group sync, it's going to give me the global catalog. So as you can see here, select the LDAP group to sync users from. All right. So if let's say that you're doing this as a test at the beginning, then you can have a specific group, of 3 or 4, users that as a testing group. And then you can, once that everything is working, then you can actually add more groups or synchronize more group as you go, right? So let's say, for example, I have here one that it's related to Wi-Fi users, right? And then I can add them to a specific group in here. Let's say it's going to be the sales group in my environment. That's the option that I was telling you about, that you can create a new synchronized group with the same name that you have in your LDAP or Active Directory. Okay, so as you can see in here, that's sales engineer, and there's another one that it is I created as a test in there, that it have a different a group that I synchronize from Active Directory. You also have the option in here. Let's say that you made some changes on Active Directory and you want to synchronize it manually, and you don't want to wait for 15 minutes or an hour or so on. Then you can start synchronization here, and then it will actually populate the groups again, and also the users that belong to a specific group. So in this scenario, if I want to show you here what I have done, also we have something called advanced query, right? The advanced query, it's a little bit with, you have to put the syntax for it. So I can create a name for it. I can select the group, for example, sales engineer, and then I'm gonna put the advanced query. One of the examples that I created in here for you to see, right? So I just call it AuthPoint, the group that I want to, synchronize some users from Active Directories to the one that I have in AuthPoint. It's going to be sales engineers, and then we have the advanced query that we have the members of the AuthPoint demo. This is a security group that I created in my Active Directory that I want to synchronize from. Right. So once this is done, then I'm gonna come back here under my users, and I will see the users. They're gonna show up. Make sure that these users have an email address, right, in the Active Directory. Otherwise, it will not show up in here. And I can, differentiate between these two. So the type, we have AuthPoint. It means that this user I created in the cloud here, that they are not part of the Active Directory. The one that it shows as an LDAP, it's something that I synchronized using the procedure we just saw. Right. So once now I have actually the users, now we can go under the authentication policies. So the idea about authentication policies, and this is something that we updated, recently, that it works like a firewall, right? That you have a list of the order of, the policies, and whenever that we create the policy, we're gonna give it a name. Let's say this is for SSL VPN for sales. Okay, and then we're gonna select the authentication option, and we're gonna have password, push, and OTP. These are the options that's gonna be available for you when it comes to the SSL VPN. QR code is not something that it is available with the SSL VPN client anyway. right? And then we're gonna select here the group, right? So it's for sales engineers, and then we're gonna have the resources. It's gonna be the SSL VPN resource that we created, and the policy object is something else that is not related to this specific demo, but policy objects are saying that if they belong to a specific network, what should we do with it, right? So once that we have this information, actually the policy is what it ties, everything we talked about so far together. That you have the group, the resource, and what is the authentication that is going to be used in this scenario. So as you can see in here, I have the group as sales engineer, the resource is SSL VPN, right? And it's going to be using, for example, the password and push for this users. Right? So far, these are actually the configuration that it needed to be done on the AuthPoint side. Now, if we jump here to the firewall, um, some of the configuration that is need to be done in there. Number one, that you have to go to the authentication servers, because as we agreed, that the radius, the firewall is going to be the radius client, and the gateway agent is going to be the server. So I have to add one here, and I have to put the IP address on and where the AuthPoint agent, gateway agent is installed. Right. We're going to put the shared secret. This is the one that I told you have to document earlier. And after that, we're going to save this configuration. So once that I put the authentication server here as a radius, and this radius is going to be communicating with the radius server that it is part of the gateway agent. The next step is to create a group here. So by default for SSL VPN, it's going to be the SSL VPN users group, right, that we have. But what I needed to do here, I have to make sure to go under authentication, users and group, and create a group in here that it has the same name as the one that is being expected from my Active Directory, right? So it's going to be the AuthPoint demo. This is a very important step. And the authentication server is going to be Radius. The last step that need to be done on the firewall, that I'm going to go back to the VPN, mobile VPN, same thing that, for your SSL configuration, I have already, this is done, previously, but I'm going to come here under authentication. The radius has to be the default, right? So if you have the Firebox or your Active Directory before that, it's using it for the SSL VPN authentication, you have to put radius now as the default. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Another thing is to make sure that under users and group that you have the same group that we just created, that you have the check next to it, right? Okay, and these are all of the steps that it's required on the firewall itself. The rest of it, it was done on the dashboard on the WatchGuard cloud. Okay, so the last thing I just want to show you here that let's test this. And once that we want to test it, we can go to our Firebox SSL. You put the IP address of your firewall domain name that you're using. We're going to be testing for this specific user that we had here under users, right? That it's WL that is part of the LDAP, and with the password. And we're going to click here on connect. That's going to put or send a push here to my authenticator on the phone. And I can see that it is SSL VPN. I'm going to approve that, and that will continue the process here of initiating the SSL VPN tunnel. And definitely, if you want to see this information to make sure, or if you want to come back later to find out who's been authenticated using what, you can go under Monitor, Authentication, and you can see here the username, all right, and that using SSL VPN as a resource. Okay, so let's switch gear here and let's talk about Ike version 2 and how we can use AuthPoint to integrate it with Ike version 2. So first, I wanted to explain to you a little bit when it comes about the components that is involved in this process. This is a screenshot that it is being taken from the integration guide for the integration of Ike version 2 with AuthPoint. Um, as you can see in here, some of these components we're already familiar with, which is going to be the firewall, the AuthPoint gateway agent that is being installed, but we're going to add here the MPS server for Microsoft. And the main reason for this, because it's required to validate the credentials from the MSJF version 2 radius requests against the Active Directory the users that we will have in there. As you can see in this screenshot, the MPS and the gateway agent, they are not on the same server, but in my environment, I'm going to have both of them in the same location, and that will make some changes that it's related to the AuthPoint gateway agent port that is being used in there, because now we have two radius servers that is going to be installed on the same server. So we need to change one of the ports from 1812 to something else. Also notice that for this Ike version 2, MSJF version 2, the MFA will only work with push-based authentication. And the reason for this, because when we type in the password, it's going to be the password plus the username, and they're going to be hashed together. And the AuthPoint will not be able to retrieve the OTP part from the password itself. So you have the password and the OTP together at the same packet that is going to be sent. Okay, so we're gonna jump into the environment and I'll show you what are the steps. Mainly, we're gonna start with the MPS server, that is already installed, but we will do some configuration in there. Also, we're gonna go next to the AuthPoint dashboard, and we will do some configuration in there, and then also we will need to do some configuration of the firewall itself. Okay, so the first step here is to go to the MPS server, and this is definitely, it's one of the roles that is going to be on the server, Windows Server. I have a Windows Server 2016 in here. The first thing is to add a Radius client under the MPS server, and in this scenario, it's going to be actually, we're going to start with a friendly name, which is going to be the gateway AuthPoint, the address that we're going to put in there, which is the IP address of where the AuthPoint gateway agent is installed. So the AuthPoint gateway agent is going to be the Radius client of the MPS server. Right, so it's going to be the IP address in here that where I installed the gateway agent, which is the same server that I have here, which is the domain controller Active Directory server. And also we're gonna type in the shared secret. This is the same shared secret that we will have already typed on the AuthPoint configuration. It's the same that we done with the SSL VPN earlier as well. When it comes under advanced, we're just gonna leave it as is, which is gonna be radius standard. The second thing that we need to do is the network policy. So we have to add a network policy in here. We're going to give it a name. In this scenario, put the name as Ike version 2 Active Directory Group. It's an enable policy. We want to grant access. I will put the type of the network access server as unspecified in this scenario. But then we're going to go to the conditions, and we will going to put or we add here the Windows group name, the same name in the Active Directory group that we want for our testing, which is going to be AuthPoint demo in this scenario. And the constraints, we're not going to change a lot. It's just we need to make sure that here under the Microsoft encrypted authentication for MSJAV version 2, and MSJAV is just to make sure that this one is unchecked. The user can change password after it has expired. And the last step in here that under settings that we need to add a filter ID, right? So just come here under add and a filter ID. Already have an existing one, right? So we want to make sure that the filter ID, which is have the same name that we are expecting here, which is going to be the AuthPoint demo under my Active Directory group. Right? So this is what I need to do in here. Sometimes just some of the troubleshooting, you can actually restart the server, the MPS server that you want. You can do netstat all, and you can see what are the ports that it is open and that there is no conflict with anything else. One last thing that I wanted to point out in here for you is related to some troubleshooting. So if you want to know where's the logs that's related to the AuthPoint gateway agent and the communication that it's happening between the gateway agent with the MPS server and also back to the firewall and back to the cloud, you can go under the local desk here and under program data. Usually this is a hidden folder, you need to show it, and then you're gonna go under WatchGuard in there, and then you're gonna see that we have AuthPoint, and you will see that all the logs that it's related to the functions that we have in the AuthPoint gateway agent, which is like ADFS, the gateway itself, the LDAP synchronization, and the radius. So when you click on radius and you go here at the bottom, you'll see all the communication that is happening. And sometimes it makes sense to come here to see, like for example, once that we do the check and we do the configuration in here, we will see that the communication with the MPS is okay or not, the request is being accepted, is it sent to the cloud, the MFA accepted that with the MSJAV version 2. So you just want to know the issue is the MPS server, the gateway agent, or the cloud configuration. Okay, so now the next thing that we're gonna do is to jump into the next component, which is going to be for the configuration, the AuthPoint dashboard. So under configure here, we're going to go and start first of all under resources. So one of the things is just changing the name here. I changed the name, this one from SSL VPN to MU VPN. So, mobile user VPN. This is the configuration and the portion that it's also is going to work for your SSL VPN. And again, highlighting this sometimes is going to cause you an issue if you don't pay attention to it. So you have to make sure are you using here user AuthPoint group or users Active Directory group. So I am trying to be consistent, and I'm gonna move on with the user Active Directory group. And this is what we're gonna have also on the firewall itself. Right, the shared secret is the same one that also we set up on the gateway agent, and it's the same that we set up on the MPS server. The only thing that is different now, as you can see, that turn on this enable MSJAV version 2, and here we're gonna put the IP address on where the MPS server is located, which is the same actually that I have both the gateway agent and the MPS server on the same server. The port is going to be 1812, and the timeout, we're going to have it as 60 seconds. And we're going to save that. And then we need to make sure under the gateway here that we changed the port to something else other than the 1812, right? Because now we have both the radius servers in the same server. This is very important to do in there. After we have the resources, make sure that the gateway is already updated. Then the main test that I will be doing, if we go under users, and I'm not going to go again under the Active Directory, we already done that. I'm going to use the same user here, WL3, wishes he belongs to the AuthPoint demo group. This is what we're going to be using for the IKE version 2 login information, and we want to add the MFA to it. So what I have to do in here, I have to go under the authentication policies. Under authentication policies, I have to have a policy that allow this communication. So as you can see in here, I have mobile user VPN authentication policy that is going to be using password, that is going to be using push. The group that is going to be applying to is the AuthPoint demo that it is being synchronized from LDAP. The resources going to be the mobile user VPN radius client that we just set up, right? Once that I click here on save, I have all the components that I need when it comes to the configuration on the AuthPoint itself. And the last component is going to be your firewall. So when we go to the firewall in here, first of all, we have to go under the authentication servers, radius, right? And make sure here again that what is the IP address for it, right? The IP address that we have. So the Radius server is installed on the same server that we have the MPS and the gateway agent that we have. So we have the IP address in there. The port is changed to the port that we already updated in the dashboard of AuthPoint, so that to avoid the conflict with the MPS 1812. And we have the timeout 60 seconds. The next step that we need to do in here is to make sure we are under authentication, users and groups, that we have a group called AuthPoint demo that the authentication server for is the radius. And since we did the SSL VPN earlier, it is actually the same information that we're going to have. The next step definitely is to go on the level of the VPN. So we're going to go to IKE version 2. The configuration has already been done. This specific webinar is not about how to do the IKE version 2 VPN. It is how to integrate the MFA with it, so that it's already the configuration is already in there, where we have the Firebox address from the outside, the virtual pool in there, the DNS information. Under authentication, we want to make sure that we are using the radius there, and under users and group that we chose the AuthPoint demo. And always make sure that you type it correctly and it is case sensitive, right? Under security here, there is nothing that we need to do. Okay. So these are the configuration that it's need to be done on the firewall. There's only one thing in here, just to make sure that the policy that allowing for IKE version 2 users, to communicate with the resources, to have the same group in there, the AuthPoint demo, as part of it. Right. Once that you save the configuration in here, some of the troubleshooting definitely is also you can take a look at your traffic and see if there's the radius information is being sent back and forth or not. But let's test this and see if everything is working properly. Okay, so let's test this. We have here the connection that we have for the profile that already been set on the PC itself. It is for IKE version 2. If I click on that, it's already saved the username and password that's being used for the Active Directory. If I click on connect, then I will see that I am trying to sign in. That's the IP address. We have MUVPN, and then I'm gonna click on yes. It's gonna complete, and it is being connected. Okay, so that it will bring us to the end of this webinar where we discussed, the differences between the different type of VPN protocols, and then we focused on how to integrate AuthPoint with SSL VPN and then with IKE version 2. I hope that it was useful and it's going to help in the process of your testing this in your environment. And this is my recommendation. Uh, is to check the video, is to go to the integration guides, documentation. This is always going to be updated whenever there's any changes in the steps, and to test it yourself in your environment so that you will be familiar with all the components that we discussed today. Another thing that I just wanted to mention that definitely we will wait for a few minutes so that we see if you have any questions. You can type them in the chat window or send it to us personally so that we can reply to it after the session. And also, you can visit our YouTube channel for the Team Canada. That it is the link is already included, in the invitation that is being sent to you for this webinar.